and then out to California for a week or so, and then back in New York to work.
Well, I want to thank you for coming today. It was very nice having you. A nice change of pace for us. Okay. We wish you good luck with your careers, all of you. Thank you very much. Bodies.
If the research is right, there's a change coming over the kids in America. It's just beginning.
For the members of 2nd Battalion, 6th Infantry, it was the grueling task of running the Guardian Mile through the Grunewald Forest, beginning near the Huttenweg exit of the Avis Autobahn. The entire battalion lined up for the 4-mile trek through the forest, running to get to a designated site where breakfast was to be waiting for them. Despite the hills and sand they traveled through, the soldiers still averaged about 8.15 seconds per mile. Despite the hills and deep sand they traveled through, the soldiers still averaged about 8 minutes, 15 seconds per mile. When they got to their campsite, there was an award and promotion ceremony, and of course, rest for the group of tired soldiers. Meantime, inside the company headquarters at McNair Barracks, leaders from the 2nd Battalion, 6th inside the company headquarters at McNair Barracks, leaders from the 3rd Battalion, 6th Infantry held a ceremony of a different kind. CSC Company A. Meantime, inside the company area of headquarters. Meantime, inside the company area at McNair Barracks, leaders from the 3rd Battalion, 6th Infantry held a ceremony of a different kind. CSC Company A and Headquarters Company 3-6 were all distinguished for having 100% participation in the Association of the United States Army, or AUSA. The leaders of each unit were obviously happy to accept the awards, showing the cohesiveness of their units. Reporting for AFN News, I'm Air Force Sergeant Bedford C. Vickers.
And the guys who drive the ball very straight are going to be the ones who play pretty well.
Defending champion Ray Floyd set a new course record with a 600-par 66 in Tuesday's Pro-Am. Despite Floyd's round, most of the players feel the scores at the TPC will be very high.
The wind's going to make it very difficult. It's a difficult golf course to start with. We played it, you might say, under bluebird conditions today, and when you get this golf course under windy conditions and the way the greens will be and the way you'll get the pin placements and trying to chip around this green, you're going to see some high scores.
In Jacksonville, Florida, this is Rick Zurak reporting.
Editors, the focus of tonight's Nightline, the Middle East, the Israeli perspective, including an interview with the new Israeli ambassador to the United States. Unscheduled item, Indiana, sandbagging in Fort Wayne before dawn this morning. Natural sound, 40 seconds.
Say cheese. Say hi to Trisha. Hi, Trish. Act normal. I'm acting normal. Where's the bag? Where's the bag?
And that's a good night from DEF.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight, with Peter Jennings at the Foreign Desk in London.
Men from the 82nd Airborne begin arriving in the Middle East, and here in Britain, police want the death penalty back.
Max Robinson in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
At least 8,000 are homeless as the floodwaters continue to rise, and the worst is yet to come.
And from our desk in Washington, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. Across much of the Midwest right now, the big worry is the weather. Floods and tornadoes already have caused numerous deaths and millions of dollars in damages. The devastation is widespread, but the most critical point remains Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Max Robinson is there tonight. Max?
Frank, the next 48 hours are critical here in Fort Wayne. The three rivers that run through this city are expected to crest at record levels. 10% of the city is already under as much as 6 feet of water, with property damage already $16 million and climbing. Today, the number of evacuations ordered doubled to 8,000, and by the time floodwaters crest, as many as 20,000 people may be homeless. Right now, it's a battle against time. David Garcia reports.
Fort Wayne is a city in motion, trying to save itself as floodwaters continue a gradual but steady rise. This morning, they called out the reserves, the young. The 9 high schools here closed, and 2,000 student volunteers showed up for sandbag duty. In caravans like these, they headed for trouble spots to help.
It's just the thought of, you know, if it would happen, I'd want everybody to help me. So I think I need to help other people.
Well, somebody has to do it. We're just about as able as anybody else.
At one dike, in danger of overflowing, first a look at the enemy.
Gee, this is wild.
Then to work. The objective here was to save this neighborhood. Residents under orders today to evacuate. They had no choice.
The dike up there is crumbling, and over there it's just coming through. So I'm pretty scared.
Never been in a flood area, and I almost dropped my flood insurance. That's what got me, and I've got it.
Other volunteers went door to door in the area offering evacuation help. Back at the command post, additional work volunteers were at the ready. Officials say at least 1,500 people were on hand at any given time. More than 6,500 passed through here by mid-afternoon.
The battle against rising floodwaters isn't restricted to Fort Wayne. All across the Midwest, floods are taking an incredible toll. Ron Miller has a report.
Thousands more are homeless across the Midwest, where damage exceeds $34 million, and it's getting worse as rivers like the Reagan in southern Michigan's Monroe County continue to inch upward toward their flood crest. The governors of Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan are petitioning the federal government for disaster relief that's sure to come. In Peoria, the Illinois River is still rising, causing the closing of high schools where, as in Fort Wayne, students are turning their energies to sandbags, and some flooded homeowners are turning their attention to relocating to higher ground.
I can't hardly take it anymore on the river.
In other parts of the Midwest, there have been tornadoes. 4 people were killed in Mulberry, Kansas, when a tornado devastated at least a quarter of that community. A few towns, like Grand Rapids, Ohio, near Toledo, are now able to begin to clean up, but as waters receded here, they inched upward downstream, and across the Midwest, flooded rivers are still rising. Ron Miller, ABC News.
Bad weather and floods are a problem over much of the country. On the West Coast, heavy rains continue to soak the dry lake bed at Edwards Air Force Base, the primary landing site for the Space Shuttle Columbia. However, NASA says it intends to go ahead with Monday's launch as scheduled. More on the flooding here in the Fort Wayne area, and a special assignment report on the crisis facing America's farmers, only worsened by the flooding, later in this broadcast. Frank?
Thank you, Max. We'll also have a report on President Reagan and his plan for economic aid for the Caribbean, American military advisors on duty in Honduras, and American military forces arrive in the Middle East to help keep the peace in the Sinai.
ABC's World News Tonight, brought to you by Geritol.
You're not too young for Geritol, 'cause it's Geritol.
You're sure of iron that you should take
Geritol.
And you want to stay in good shape
Geritol.
And do what's best to look great.
You're not too young for Geritol.
Get your rest and exercise and take Geritol every day. Each Geritol tablet is a special combination of potent amounts of iron and lots of important vitamins.
You're not too young for Geritol.
How can I tell him while sharing the wine all that I feel for this father of mine?
Everybody's asking if
I want to be a doctor like my dad. And I'm not so sure I want to be a doctor. Oh? But I'd sure like to be like my dad.
Ah, the joy of sharing Gallo wine. Share the joy of Gallo wine.
President Reagan today formally submitted to Congress his package of $350 million in emergency economic aid for countries in the Caribbean. So naturally, he talked about Central America. But he was very cautious when it came to assessing the latest potential Soviet threat to the Caribbean. We have this report from White House correspondent Sam Donaldson. I'm sorry, Mr. Donaldson's report is not ready for broadcast right at this time. But the administration did today announce plans to counter Soviet and Cuban propaganda in Central America by building a network of radio stations in the region. Charles Wick, the director of the International Communications Agency, told Congress, "We are involved in a war of ideas and of credibility. Our adversary is the Soviet Union, and our weapon is truth." Well, for years, the United States has provided training in other kinds of weapons to many nations of Central America. Tonight, this report from Tom Shell in Honduras.
The United States has about 90 military personnel here in Honduras, including members of the Special Forces, who are providing advanced training for Honduran paratroopers. It's part of the $10 million in military aid the United States has given Honduras to build up the nation's defense forces. These men are officers and non-coms of the Honduran Army's paratroop battalion. And when the 4-week course is completed, the U.S. instructors will return to their units in Panama, and the Hondurans will become instructors for the other 800 men in the battalion. Sergeant First Class Gordon Smith of Newark, Ohio says the Hondurans are enthusiastic students.
Our primary mission here was to train these people in military freefall techniques for mostly internal defense.
Honduras is surrounded by trouble in Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte says that if El Salvador falls to the communists, it will increase the pressure on democratic Honduras.
In addition to the concern about Salvador, I think there is a deep-seated preoccupation in this country about the arms buildup and the increase in the size of the army of Nicaragua.
The Honduran army is smaller than those of its neighbors, but the hope is that the training received from the United States will give the Hondurans the combat superiority needed to meet any external threat. Tom Shell, ABC News, Tamara, Honduras.
Now we have our report ready on the President's program of economic aid to Central America. Here is White House correspondent Sam Donaldson.
In the legislative proposal for his Caribbean Basin Initiative, President Reagan underlined to Congress his main selling point, the program's aim of enhancing United States security.
Extremist groups and violent minorities are exploiting this economic misery to gain new footholds in this hemisphere. If we don't act now, the dangers will grow. New Cubas will arise. The cost of ensuring our security to the south will escalate.
Ask about the possibility that Soviet missiles might be shipped to Cuba. One interpretation of Soviet President Brezhnev's threat to retaliate against the United States if NATO deploys its own missiles in Europe. The president said he still isn't sure what Brezhnev was saying.
All they would have to do is agree to what we suggested, and there would be no nuclear threat left in Europe at all.
Well, what would we do if they tried to put missiles in Cuba again?
Well, as I say, wait till I read the implications of this. I'm not going to make a...
But on Capitol Hill, the administration was prepared to comment on congressional concerns that the present hard line toward Nicaragua doesn't match the peaceful tone of the president's new Caribbean Basin initiatives.
The Nicaraguans professed that they're worried about being invaded by the United States. We said, all right, well, we will propose to you a non-aggression pact of sorts. But we've told them that they must stop their support for the insurgency in El Salvador.
One final note on the Caribbean story today. White House spokesman David Gergen complained that the American television networks have been reporting more on the atrocities committed in El Salvador by the government than on those committed by the rebels. Gergen suggested such an imbalance has not been helpful to administration policy. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
On this St. Patrick's Day, the Prime Minister of Ireland, Charles Haughey, met at the White House with the great-grandson of Michael O'Regan of County Tipperary. There was Irish music and song as the President and the Prime Minister went to lunch. There were the usual expressions of mutual goodwill, but Haughey went beyond pleasantries to ask Mr. Reagan to help encourage the British to get out of Northern Ireland. The President had earlier issued a statement saying that while Americans hope for peace, the United States cannot chart a course for the people of Northern Ireland. In a moment, Peter Jennings will have tonight's news from overseas.
Digel tops planet acids. We proved it in recent laboratory tests. Cutting the yellow top off a Digel tablet illustrates the results. Without its top layer, Digel consumes as much heartburn-producing acid as plain acids like Rolaids. What's more, Digel has the yellow top and gives you the fast gas-calming action of simethicone. Conclusion: when you want more than plain relief, Digel tops plain acids.
Here's how I talked my husband into Buick's little limousine. First, I pointed out how elegant it looks. I mean, just look at it. Then I showed him how cushiony and comfortable it feels inside. And I said, just consider how economical the Regal is to drive. I was very convincing. The only problem is, now that I've talked him into it, I can't seem to talk him out of it.
Hi.
Hi.
Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick?
Which of the following jobs expose workers to the least on-the-job accidents? Did you pick chemical worker? Among all major companies in the country, where does DuPont consistently rank in keeping workers safe from accidents? The answer? First. Where is a DuPont chemical worker safest? With DuPont's emphasis on workers' safety, he's actually safer at work.
DuPont, makers of better things for better living.
Overseas this Wednesday, American troops are on the ground in the Middle East. Men of the 82nd Airborne Division began preparing to monitor the peace between Egypt and Israel when Israel withdraws from the Sinai Peninsula next month. They'll be part of a multinational force, and as ABC's Bill Siemens reports from the Sinai, the American presence is as much political as it is military.
The battalion from the 82nd Airborne Division landed at an Israeli air base at the remote southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula, at Sharm el-Sheikh. They're here as peacekeepers and will patrol along the Egyptian side of the border after the Israelis withdraw on April 26th. The American contingent will make up about half of the 2,500-man multinational peacekeeping force, with the other troops coming from 10 other countries. They'll be armed with only light infantry weapons, mainly to protect themselves.
You will find that we have described in detail how to try and avoid any kind of incidents. And we will use armed force only in self-defense.
The 82nd Airborne marched the 10 miles to their base camp and were greeted along the way by the few tourists left in the area. Their commander, Colonel William Garrison, led the march, hobbling on a broken foot suffered in a recent parachute jump. The U.S. force will serve as a buffer between the Egyptians and the Israelis to try to prevent disagreements from becoming serious confrontations. This, then, is more than just a military commitment. It's also a political commitment because these American troops will be directly involved in any future possible dispute between Israel and Egypt over how the Camp David Agreement is being carried out here in the Sinai. Bill Siemens, ABC News, Sharm el-Sheikh.
One other note about Israel. The former Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin said this week he sees the possibility of war on the Mideast horizon. In a Newsweek interview, Rabin said there was serious deterioration in the peace process, and he said the Reagan administration had about 6 months to reverse things. Rabin, who is listened to in various capitals, sees 2 possible explosions, one which could involve Israel and the Palestinians, the other a new civil war in Lebanon, triggered by this summer's Lebanese presidential elections. There'll be more on how the Israelis see the present Middle East situation tonight on Nightline. Frank?
Here in Washington today, the General Accounting Office said the Internal Revenue Service is not keeping up with enforcement of the tax laws or with the noticeable increase of people cheating on their taxes. And as a result, billions of dollars are uncollected every year. More on this story now from Carol Simpson.
According to preliminary findings from a new study by the IRS, the federal government may be losing nearly $73 billion a year in revenue from uncollected income taxes. The General Accounting Office blames the IRS for failing to enforce the tax laws and the American people for cheating on their income taxes. Some examples include taxpayers who fail to report their total income and individuals who earn money from illegal activities. Officials say somewhere between $150 and $400 billion a year in income goes unreported. The GAO's William Anderson said the problem has been getting worse each year.
But I'd say that the trend line is almost straight downhill over the last 10 or 15 years. And given the fact that the amount of IRS audit coverage continues to drop, I'm not particularly optimistic the situation is going to change for the better.
A bill has been introduced in Congress to attack the tax cheating problem. It calls for tougher enforcement of the tax laws and stiffer penalties for tax fraud. Sponsors of the bill say if the government can recover at least some of the tax losses, it could help reduce the budget deficit, and it would be less painful than more cuts in federal spending. Carol Simpson, ABC News, Washington.
Braniff Airlines, which lost $160 million last year, today announced it's ending its service to South America. Braniff plans to rent most of its present South America routes to Pan American World Airways, at least for the next 4 years. This is a move that should mean at least $20 million to Braniff. On Wall Street, stocks closed lower in moderate trading.
Colds and flu really seem to be getting around this year. If they get around to you, put Bufferin to work on the aches, pains, and fever.
Bufferin is the only leading pain relief tablet that has buffered strength.
That means strong aspirin, the pain reliever doctors prefer, plus special protection against aspirin stomach upset. The combination of the two is what buffered strength is all about. For relief of the aches, pains, and fever of colds and flu, put the buffered strength of Bufferin to work.
Now's the time to clean up, America. Get great bargains on almost all Hoover vacuum cleaners during the big National Hoover Week sale. Terrific savings on this all-time favorite Hoover upright. On our best cleaning Celebrity Powerhead canister. On our most advanced cleaner, the Concept One with Power Drive. They're all sale priced. So see your participating Hoover dealer now and get the cleaner you want at a price you can't beat. But don't wait. The National Hoover Week sale is ending soon.
Right now, you can rent any size gasoline-powered truck and rider's fleet for one low daily rate, plus a variable mileage charge. What a nice little truck. That's the daily rate. How about a little bigger? Same rate. You want one way out to here? Still the same. When Ryder rents trucks at this price, we almost hate to let them go.
Ryder, $29.95 a day for the best truck money can rent.
When you're working on your American dream, you want it to last forever.
Anderson has helped build American dreams for over 75 years with innovation, energy efficiency, and pride. At Anderson, there are no seconds.
We take the time to build the best. That's what we've always been. Come home to quality. Come home to Anderson.
The Illinois congressional primary elections yesterday provided powerful evidence of the potential impact of remapping, drawing new boundary lines for congressional districts. Republican Edward Derwinski, a 12-term veteran, and Thomas Railsback, a leading member of the House Judiciary Committee during the Nixon impeachment inquiry, were both beaten, largely because their districts were redrawn and both lost most of the voters who had supported them before. On the Democratic side, Representative John Ferry, picked by the late Mayor Daley of Chicago for Congress in 1975, was defeated yesterday by a candidate picked this year by Daley's son. Max?
The rising floodwaters are not only a problem for the cities in the Midwest. Here in Indiana alone, 135,000 acres of farmland are underwater. It's much the same in parts of Ohio and Michigan. The spring floods will push many farmers over the edge and out of business. As we learned recently in traveling across the country, the American farmer was already facing a crisis. It's a scene being repeated across the country every day, this day in the Texas Panhandle. It's a farm auction, and it means that yet another farmer has quit farming and is selling off thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Philip Weatherly is watching as his life's work is being put on the auction block. His father and 3 brothers got out even earlier.
It's just not working now. This interest is like it is, and our cost of production is just forcing us to do something else.
Philip Weatherly now has to look for a job, and he's not alone. The federal government says that last year some 8,000 farmers simply quit, and another 2,900 were the victims of foreclosures. And those numbers will probably grow. For thousands of American farmers, the promise of spring may be a short-lived one this year, for with high interest rates and low farm prices, and the cost of everything from fuel to fertilizer escalating all the time, for many American farmers, this year's spring planting may be their very last.
What the consumer's got to recognize, if a farmer produces it, he's got to have a profit. He's not going to continue producing it at a loss, and he can't. He's going to go close shop and get out of business.
In the Texas Panhandle, work has already begun on the spring planting season. Farmers produced record crops here last year, but prices for their cotton dropped from 80 cents a pound in 1980 to 35 cents last year. And costs for necessities like tractor fuel have jumped from 66 cents a gallon 3 years ago to $1.13 a gallon today. That leads longtime farmers like Edwin Lyde to think about quitting.
Because I don't intend to sit here and try to feed this nation and foreign nations out of my pocket and lose what I worked for all my life.
In Weldon, in southern Illinois, spring planting is still a month away. But the talk in Weldon is already centering on whether prices will be high enough to keep farmers in business. Dwayne Riddle is a fourth-generation farmer who works 400 acres, but is worried about the future.
Well, I've been in this business about 19 years, and I never really ever had a fear before. The old-timers always said, boy, we could have another depression, and I thought impossible. But I'm not so sure anymore.
Dwayne Riddle figures he may only have a year left. He borrows money to keep the farm going until harvest, and he's watched the interest he pays jump from $9,000 in 1978 to $20,000 last year. But the price of his corn has fallen from $3.30 a bushel to $2.40 a bushel, and he's not pleased with the government.
I cannot operate my business at a deficit. They've operated the government at a deficit 19 out of the last 20 years, so I've been told. But they're printing money to pay their bills, and I'm having to come up with real money.
We do need higher prices, but the government is not the place to guarantee prosperity for agriculture. We don't have the resources to do it. We can't buy prosperity for agriculture. Prosperity must come out of the marketplace.
But until then, the fallout is being felt everywhere. The average farmer's income fell from $11,000 in 1979 to $7,800 in 1981, and will probably go lower this year. At the Weldon State Bank, 80% of their loans used to be to farmers. That has dropped to 55%, and that concerns banker Dick Colbert.
I seriously question, Max, what I'm going to have to give to my children when I get through with the bank in 20 years. And I don't know whether we're going to have anything to pass on to the next generation or not.
Until recently, farming was always thought of as a guaranteed way to feed the family and to make a modest living. Now it would appear the future of this nation's small farmers is bleak, with bigger corporate farms the wave of the future. But to many farmers across the country, bigger is hardly better.
This is the moment. The grain is ripe and ready. This is where Roman meal bread begins. With high-protein wheat flour, whole-grain hard red spring wheat, whole-grain rye, bran, flaxseed meal, and other nutritious ingredients to make every loaf of Roman meal bread light brown, tender textured, and delicious. Roman meal bread, made from the best the land has to offer.
Would you get what you got if you could have got an Oldsmobile?
Wow, this gets good mileage.
But if a Cutlass Supreme offered the same kind of mileage...
Would you get what you got if...
You could have got a Cutlass?
You bet. You could have. Even a roomy Delta 88.
An 88?
Even an 88.
A Cutlass Sierra, too?
A roomy diesel Olds offers the same kind of mileage as many small cars.
Why did we get what we got?
You could have got an Oldsmobile.
Mrs. Johnson, when you need an antacid, watch your salt. The Surgeon General's report says Americans get too much salt. So reach for Riopan Plus, a low-sodium antacid for fast relief. In laboratory tests, Riopan Plus worked in seconds, 4 times faster than the 2 leading liquids, and kept on working to neutralize excess acid. Many doctors recommend Riopan Plus, a low-sodium antacid for fast relief. Riopan Plus.
2 stories tonight involving crime overseas. In Italy, another interesting revelation about the kidnapping of General James Dozier. One of the Red Brigades who'd guarded the general said he'd had time to shoot Dozier when police burst in to rescue him. Why didn't he? Giovanni Cucci, whose turn state's evidence, said he no longer considered the general an enemy. And finally tonight, a call for war against criminals here in Britain. It comes from the chairman of the Police Federation, who also said police need the help of the politicians. Well, in Parliament today, 60 members, all from the governing Conservative Party, have called for the death penalty to be reintroduced. As ABC's Greg Dobbs reports, that is exactly the kind of help British police are looking for.
It's been the lead story here.
The police union says bring back hanging.
But the police didn't really need news coverage to state their position. They had already paid $54,000 for big ads to run in 5 national newspapers this morning. And the ads are an outgrowth of recent events. This month alone, 2 policemen in this nation of traditionally unarmed police have been killed. 1 stabbed, 1 shot in the line of duty. The ads say that since capital punishment was abolished by Parliament here in 1965, murders of policemen have more than doubled. 26 murdered on the British mainland, a shocking number to Britons.
Millions are asking, is it civilized to kill by law? Does it really act as a deterrent?
The points against capital punishment were demonstrated for decades here before it was banned. But what the police also suggest in their ads is the death penalty would deter terrorists. Last October, IRA bombs killed 3 people and terrorized London. And the ads say the death penalty would make criminals think twice before carrying guns and prevent the unfortunate trend toward arming the police.
We have now reached the point where unless something drastically effective is done in this country, we could find ourselves on the verge of anarchy.
A bill to bring capital punishment back was defeated here in Parliament by a bipartisan 60% majority just 3 years ago. But the police and at least some of the public believe that as long as people keep dying here at the hands of murderers, capital punishment is worth considering again. Greg Dobbs, ABC News, London.
Thank you, Greg. Once again, tonight's top story, severe flooding has forced about 8,000 people from their homes in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Rivers in the area are expected to rise another foot by tomorrow. The National Weather Service says more rain is expected tonight, and new storms are expected to hit the same region on Friday and Saturday, so it's not very good. That's our report for now on World News Tonight. This is Frank Reynolds. For ABC News, good night from Washington.
Tomorrow on Good Morning America, a debate. Should Congress prohibit covert operations in Nicaragua? From ABC, this has been World News Tonight.
Wednesday,